So now you've gone through the basics of HTML and CSS, and my goal for you is to get you into a framework like Bootstrap as soon as possible so that we can actually move you as soon as possible into JavaScript. Bootstrap will allow you to have a good-looking front end. That's what we call what the web page actually looks like to the user, the front end. Allow you to have a good-looking front end as soon as possible. The real learning of coding, the real challenge of coding, is something we haven't even touched yet. It's with JavaScript. We are learning the basics of HTML and CSS at first because we want to be able to display our results in a browser. It feels good to see your results. It's a good way to learn programming. So we've basically taught you your letters and numbers. You know, if we're going to go back to learning a language, we've taught you some basic words, but all that requires is really just memorizing some rules. And like I said, you're building your glitch page to be your own set of these rules for yourself. But when it comes down to it, you're not really constructing poetry, right? You're not constructing beautiful sentences. You're just getting the grammar and the syntax and all that stuff down. So that's the metaphor we're using. And so I want to get you as quickly as possible to know the most functional words, you know, so you can, and again, in this metaphor, order food at a restaurant, right? That's what JavaScript is good for. It's good for doing things. We can enable the web browser to do things with JavaScript. And so we're going to move to Bootstrap pretty quickly. It's going to allow us to make mobilely responsive websites. And what does that mean? Well, when you go to any website, any modern website, it should look good on your device, and it should look good on mobile. It should look good on any device. If you view it on an iPad or something in between a desktop and a smartphone, it's going to look good. And I want to show you what that means using an example from developers.vegas. This is a website I programmed, and I hit F12 while in the Chrome browser, and that brings me up this what we often call the console. I don't know if that's its official term because I know that there's a tab here called console, but we often say in the development world, we'll say open up the console, and boom, this is what we mean. And now what you can do is you can just drag and drop this border, and you can change the width of your page and just to see how it looks responsively. And I want to show you what happens to this page as it gets smaller and smaller. Okay, if you notice that the sidebar disappeared entirely and instead replaced itself here with this little call out right here. I'll show you that again. Here's the sidebar, and now the sidebar disappears, and it's in this little section here instead. You might have noticed that there was some advertising, sponsored by, at the bottom right that disappeared, but actually I just moved it to the bottom of the page, sponsored by. Okay. As we shrink it even farther down, something else happens. Okay, so now we're always following this 2/3, 1/3, or this might be 1/4, 3/4 layout. And when I say 2/3, 1/3, or 1/4, 3/4, I really mean if you look at this section here and you view this as 100% and you divide it up, it really is a 2/3, 1/3. So you'll see that this is 1/3 column. There's a space and then 2/3 columns right here. So that has some sort of visual symmetry to it. And so that's what all of these videos follow. And again, with the sponsors at the bottom, they even follow the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. If we had a third sponsor, it would go right here. We used to have a third sponsor. We don't. I just took it off. As we go even farther down, okay, you can see that it's gone to more of a 50%, 1/2 layout here with the video thumbnail and the text. And same thing up here. Going back, you can see that the text itself moved around a little bit. And finally, here's the smartphone view where we stack everything in a single column. We've got the inputs in a single column. We've got the button in a single column. Video, description, and then your ads, your sponsors, again, are stacked up in a single column as well. And that's what it looks like on a smartphone. Again, there's this fun view. You can click up here, this little device toolbar, and it'll just put an iPhone 6, 7, or 8 frame around it, and that's how you can see, you can get the feel that, oh, this is what people see on their smartphones. And you can take that off by just toggling that again. So that's what we mean when we say mobily responsive or just responsive. And this website actually uses Bootstrap. The last job I was in, we also used Bootstrap. It's used by 1.5 million projects on GitHub alone. There are many projects that aren't on GitHub. So it's used by a lot of businesses, a lot of people. It's the most popular HTML, CSS, and JavaScript framework. It's going to allow us to quickly make these mobily responsive websites that look really good for us. So our trick is to learn Bootstrap, and it's a good just 2 days of lessons to learn Bootstrap inside of the free code camp. You'll go to front-end libraries certification, and then there's Bootstrap. There's 31 different lessons. Now you'll want to be applying this into your glitch page. And so that's what I want to walk you through in the next couple steps. Now I'm going to show you how you load Bootstrap into your glitch project. But before I do that, I first want to show you what's going on behind the scenes with glitch. You may have just cleared this stuff out of your glitch project, and that's okay. You may have been nervous about it and just left it there, and that's okay. Either one is fine. If you've deleted it, all you have to do is just type it back in as you see it. What's happening is, first it's loading in a style sheet. Glitch creates not only just this HTML file that displays this web page, they actually create a whole folder structure in the background, and that's what makes it really powerful. One of the things that makes it very powerful. One of the things in the folder is a JavaScript file called script.js and a CSS file called style.css. So let me just show you the script.js file. Whenever you send someone your website, in the background, in the console that we talked about earlier, it's actually going to print the word hi. It's going to log the word hi. This is just JavaScript, and I'll show you when I click into a new window and then I hit F12 to view the console, you see that it says the word hi. There's a warning here, but that's one of my many extensions that's causing that warning. But my app that Glitch helped me make with this Glitch project is printing the word hi. You could just change it to hello. It'll save, and you can see that automatically it automatically changed and reloaded this page when I made the change here to say hello there. Great. Like I said, we're not really going to mess with that, but now you know how it's kind of plugged in. Everything, the HTML is like, I don't know, it's like the home base. It's the index.html is like the default. This is what loads. And then it calls all these other things. It's going to call this JavaScript script file. It's going to link to the style file. Okay. So when we look at this CSS that they have already linked as a default, this is what Glitch has as default. You might have wondered why your your heading was often this color, which I think is like a blue. A lot of times the default was blue. And why it was italicized, well, it's because Glitch was loading it with this style sheet. I've changed my H1 to not be that way, or actually I'm not using an H1. That's the real trick. They changed their H1. So for example, if I go back and use their H1, this is what a lot of you have. You have a blue italicized H1. Glitch does that on purpose so that you know that they're changing something. They don't change much, but they change just that. In my particular project, I opted to not use any H1 for some reason. So I didn't have that effect going on. Now what you can do is you can just delete this, and I recommend just deleting this. Now, so that changed the H1. And here's the default body stuff, but we're going to delete this too. And this is what you're now looking at. The font that you now see is your browser's default font. It's a little different. It's called a serif font because it's got these little wings, these little serifs on it. That's what those are called. It's a little uglier. It has less margin here because we deleted that. And we can even delete this comment. We don't need that comment. So there's nothing in our CSS file now that's being shipped over to index.html. what we are going to do, our plan is to insert Bootstrap into this file, into our index.html file. Then we're going to take all of our style that we've created and we are going to put it inside of style.css. And let's start with that. Let's start with moving it over to style, just so you can see that nothing will change when we do this. One thing I do, just to make my files look as pretty as they do, as I click Format this file, Control-Alt-Save will also do it. But I just click Format the file. It gives me some pretty confetti. And basically, it just formats this file like if I had some bad indentation here, and that was way off to the side. This is a legitimate file. It's not an incorrect file, but it's just going to make it look prettier. And it doesn't. Pwned. Let's try it like this, right? Format this file. No. It appears to be respecting my choices for margins. But here, I know that this will work. There we go. Now I change format this file, and it rearranged my p tags to be around my text. I'm actually going to show you what's happening, why it didn't work with here in a second. There's actually a bug that I found. So, doesn't matter. The point is we're going to cut out all of this style and we're going to put it into style.css. And you don't need to keep the style tags. You just take everything within the style tags and it will just work. Watch. I'm going to select everything within the style tags. I'm going to Control X so you see that there's a style and a style. It's empty. I'm going to style.css. I'm just going to hit paste. And if you saw, what happened is that the style went away. So if I Control Z, all my styles went away. You can see I've got the default buttons down here, just the default font size and stuff like that. But when I paste my style in, it moves the text to the right. It's got my purple and blue buttons in. So you can see that it worked just fine. Now I'm going to show you the bug that I found. If you're using calc like I showed in the last video, to calculate sizes of things, or for any reason, if you're using calc for any reason, Prettier will no longer work. So if I hit this, Prettier is the program that runs every time you hit format this file. It's a program that you can run on your own computer when you work in your own development environments. They're running it in the background. So if I hit format this file, it'll show me this error. It took me a while. I made this video, couldn't figure it out. I had this long pause. I had to stop the video. It's kind of embarrassing. But I actually ended up Googling it and found that, this is what I Googled, by the way. Google skills are it's a programming skill. Let me just say that much. So there's glitch.com in quotation marks. So I'm searching, it has to have glitch.com in there. I'm searching syntax, error, calc, CSS. Again, you can see I got those words. When I hit this, I said there's a syntax error. And I knew that it had to do with calc. I narrowed it down in my when I was debugging it. So just clicking on that, and someone does this exact same thing. They try it with 3 cases, but it doesn't work with calc. It's just the version of Prettier. Again, that's the name of the application that they're using to format things. Glitch does not have the latest version, so there is a slight bug in the application. So what does that mean for you? It means that one thing you can do is you can comment it out. And one quick way that I use to comment everything out is I select something, and then I press Control slash or Control question mark. It's really Control slash. Actually, this isn't going to work quite as intended because I have some comments, so let me delete those. And I'll show you what I mean. It's going to comment the whole block. So again, I'll select these, Control slash. And so what it does is it puts and to make a comment in CSS, you put a slash star, and then you end it with a star slash. And so it blocks all of that out. Now I can hit format this file. Everything formats correctly. I can select this again, remove that. And now you just have to make this look pretty on your own. You might not think it's a big deal to make your code look pretty, but down the road, you're going to look at your own code and have to figure it out and understand what you were doing and why. And so it's a lot easier if you can make your code look nice. And 90%, that is the statistic that some person that wrote some book somewhere said, actually a really smart person, his name's just not coming to my mind right now, but 90% of the time programmers spent reading code as opposed to writing code. So if you can make your code read better, it's just going to make your job that much easier. So I just manually adjusted those. Again, this won't work unless I first comment out my calc. And now I can hit format selection. It all works. And I can put it back in. So you can see that basically I've just moved everything between the style tags to style.css, and it still works. Now I can just delete those style tags. Don't need them. You can see it's just the same thing. It's still working. Now what we want to do, the reason the style is working is because it's being called with this link, right? It's saying, hey, in the head, import the web page's style sheet. This is just a comment telling you what it's doing, but really the program is just saying these things are important and linked to this file, so load them first. And so that's what it's doing. It's loading this CSS style first, and then it's loading your HTML page. Now what we want to do is we actually want to load Bootstrap first, and then your style. So your style overwrites Bootstrap. So that's what we're going to use style.css for, is any of your own custom styles. And you're going to use Bootstrap for the base style. And so when you go to Free Code Camp, you're learning Bootstrap. You go to freecodecamp.org/learn, front-end library certification, Bootstrap. In the first challenge here, they give you a link. This is interesting because this link, all you got to do is copy and paste it, and suddenly you're going to have Bootstrap in your application. I'm going to do that now, and I'm going to tell you how that works. So you just post it right here. You can see that my font changed, the colors changed. I have no more margin here on the left-hand side. So what happened? Well, you look, it's a link, and REL stands for relationship. So it's a style sheet link, just like style.css, but it's actually linked to this file here, which is Bootstrap 3.3.7. This is hosted on the internet at this domain by MaxCDN. MaxCDN basically says, hey, you've got this very popular thing. We will host it for free. We will allow the whole world to download this and use it for free. So you are able to just copy this in, and suddenly now you have all this code from Bootstrap for free. That's the beauty of what we call open source. It's just awesome free tools that you can build off of. So like I said, these 1,114 contributors, they've provided this code to you for free. And the good thing about having so many contributors and so many people using it and watching it is that bugs get squished a lot faster than if you would make your own framework or use a lesser known framework. A really popular framework has a lot of eyeballs on it, and it's going to be more accessible to people that need accessibility concerns with web browsers, and it's going to just have less bugs and be more sturdy overall. Bootstrap right now is at version 4, but we're going to be using version 3.3.7 because that's what's taught with Free Code Camp. It's good to find the version you're at and standardize it. If you didn't go to this Free Code Camp lesson, you might ask yourself, well, how would I ever find this file that's just out on the internet that I can use? Well, you go to getbootstrap.com. If you would just Google Bootstrap, this would be the first thing that comes up, getbootstrap.com. And then in the right-hand corner, there's the version number. So whatever version you want, and again, we're learning on 3.3.7. We're going to click that. And then they offer download. You can click download. You can click getting started. And here's where they provide the CDN. The folks over at MaxCDN graciously provide CDN support for Bootstrap, blah, blah, blah. CDN, I think, just stands for Content Delivery Network. You can Google that one. So that's where you would find it. You would find the latest compiled and minified SCSS. And that's what we've put inside of our project. And it's changed a little bit of the margins here. And so we're going to put Bootstrap in and use Bootstrap. What we want to do, our challenge, is to, I had made this picture on the left-hand side and the text on the right-hand side. And I talk a little bit about the 2/3, 1/3 layout. I'm sorry, 1/3, 2/3 layout. I keep saying that backwards. But what we'd like to do is, this is kind of how I made it work with what's called a float. I put a float on the image and pulled that to the left-hand side, and then put the text up on the right. And then with H3, this quiz, I did this little bit of funkiness here. This is just some code that I know. I know it because I Googled it years ago and know it since then, on how to clear an element and put it below an element. So if I take this out, for example, I'll show you the results, right? It would just tuck it up. Maybe not. Oh, padding top, maybe. Let's see here. Yeah, so now it just tucks it underneath the thing. And that would be the case, it would just keep tucking it underneath there. But if I put this stuff back, it clears it and adds the padding that I want. So we're actually going to erase this funkiness. We're going to keep the padding, but we don't want to do the clear block. That's not necessary. So what we want is, let's say this to be on 1/3 and the text to be on 2/3 and the quiz to be below. And so what we can do, again, I want to take out all of this actually, because this will be done in Bootstrap. Now we're going to put Bootstrap into our project and style it just a little bit. We want, like I said, we want the text to be on the right-hand side and taking up 2/3 of space, and the image to take up 1/3. So let's see what we can do. Bootstrap follows something called their grid system. It's a 12-column grid system. It's somewhat complicated. You'll learn it through the free code camp challenges, but once you get it down, it does make a lot of sense. At first, you're going to be like, "What? I got to put things in this and this." The core of it is that you have a container. The whole page rests inside of a container. Only one container. Like it says, do not nest a container within a container. Only one container. And then it could either be fixed, where there's a fixed margin on either side, or it can be fluid and take up the whole space of the web page. Then within the container, you put rows. The magic of the grid system is that the container adds 15 pixels on either side, and the row subtracts 15 pixels on either side, so it ends up dead even. And the column goes right in the middle and rests on these margins, these kind of invisible margins that are created. Like I said, it's going to seem a little complicated at first, but you'll get it down. You have to remember that there's a container, and all the container does is contains rows. And all a row does is contains columns. And it's in the columns that you can make that 1/3, 2/3, 1/2, whatever you want. It's in the columns where the magic happens and you start laying something out. You're going to remember container, row, column. There's a memory trick. I'll try and give you the short version of it right now. I do, inside of the punch code cohorts, I teach a little bit longer version of this lesson. But basically, you can think of you can associate memorable images with abstract words. So for example, for container, the most memorable thing that comes to my mind is my son playing with plastic Tupperware containers. He's 2 years old, and he loves to play with plastic Tupperware containers. And inside of these containers, I make this fantastic image in my mind where inside of these containers is actually rows of corn. I grew up on a farm that had rows of corn, and it just had all these rows and we could wander through these rows of corn. And finally, growing on these rows of corn isn't actually corn. It is a newspaper column. I used to write a newspaper column in high school, and so there's newspapers coming out of these rows of corn, and it's basically me on the front page with my newspaper column. So the image that I have in my mind is my son playing with these Tupperware containers, and then there's rows of corn growing out of them. But instead of corn, it's actually my newspaper column. And when I play that weird image back to myself, I know I can see the sequence of it, and I see that it goes container, row, column. Now, whatever you associate with those words, you have to make it personal to you. You don't know my son, and you don't know my newspaper column, so you can't really have that image in your mind. You're not going to recall it quickly or easily. But what you want to do is think of the word container, think of some fantastic, memorable image to you, a positive image, and then you do the same with row, and you associate it with container in some way. Like I said, I had rows of corn growing out of these containers, these Tupperware containers, and then I associate columns with rows. Like I said, instead of corn, they were actually growing my newspaper column. That probably sounds crazy to anyone just tuning in, but it's actually a very powerful memory technique. I teach more of that, like I said, in Punch Code. That's the short lesson right there. So you will memorize container, row, column, just like this. Here's a container, row, and then columns within there. And then you'll find your life a lot easier as you implement it. So I'm just going to whip this up very quickly so you can see what I'm talking about. So I've gone ahead and entered in some Bootstrap classes, and this is making it responsive. And so we have a container, like I said, containing everything. Then we have a row, and this first row is just the H2. It's just the title. In fact, you can't really ever have a row just chilling by itself. You need to have a column inside of it. So we're going to go div class equals column dash XS12. And there. And then we're going to close the div. There we go. Now you're asking me, whoa, what is that? Why do you have column XS12? Oops, and sorry, that can't be without. There we go. So what is that? Well, you're going to learn that. And basically it's just saying that this H2 is going to take up 12 out of 12 columns. Bootstrap uses what's called a 12-column grid. So you're saying that this element will take up 12 out of 12. And the way we can get a 2/3, I'm sorry, I keep doing that. The way we can get a 1/3, 2/3 layout is by changing this to 4 and 8, because 4 divided by 12 is 1/3. 8 divided by 12 is 2/3. And that's exactly what we see here. This is 1/3, 2/3. That's how we get this layout here. What's really powerful about Bootstrap is that you can just continuously stack on these classes. I'm going to actually put that back because, for example, we don't, as this screen gets really small, we don't want to, let me blow that up a little bit. As the screen gets really small, we're just going to lose this image, and so we'd rather it stack vertically. So if we want it to stack vertically, again, it's got to be 12 out of 12 columns to take up the whole thing. And there it goes. It's stacking vertically. Now, when you pull it out to, let's say, small, column small, we'll say that it's 4. And this is column small, we'll say that it's 8. And that's the power of Bootstrap, is that that's how you design 5 different layouts. There it is. There it finally clicked that small. You can design, 4 or 5 different layouts using the same code. So basically this is saying for iPads and smartphones, it's going to be stacked vertically. And then boom, once you cross that threshold and get into what Bootstrap defines as a small screen, this is up to how Bootstrap 3 defines it, then finally we're going to put it in the 2/3, 1/3 layout. So that's how I snapped Bootstrap right into my project that I had. Now, you might be nervous about your CSS styles and the way you had things, and you don't want to mess up the page and the styles that you already had. So one thing you can do is you can actually what's called remix in Glitch. Glitch allows you to remix your own project or anyone's project, which is just copy the code and start a new project with it. In programming terms, that would also be called forking. Forking is probably a better word, but they wanted to be cool and use a microphone, so they call it remix. Programmers typically know that as forking. So that's the lesson I have on getting Bootstrap into your project. And now you can see that there's this container spacing over here. It's got the 2/3, it's got the 1/3, 2/3 layout. And as you get closer, it's going to snap into a full column, full 12 columns across layout. So that's how I got Bootstrap into this project. Again, if you want to remix it, just click the remix button. Now it's under Prism Abundant Midnight. Go, glitch, go. There it is. So now it's got an entirely new code base, entirely new website, and it's really the same thing, but I can make any changes I want to this new thing without affecting the old thing. So here's the old thing, here's the new thing. For example, if I just wanted to make this style equals color red, this is my go-to, right? So there we go. You can see that in the new version, I've made that headline red, and in the old version, it hasn't changed anything. One last gotcha I want to tell you about is the order in which you load CSS files and CSS, and you make changes to your CSS. The order in which those things happen matters. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. So as we look at a CSS file, if I would make the same button danger and I would put it a little bit lower, and I would just say that instead it's going to be purple 900, very dark purple. See, there it is, very dark purple. It's overwritten the earlier thing. So you want to make sure that your order of loading CSS is taken into account. And what I recommend is you use Bootstrap as a foundation right here. So you load it first, and then you use your style.css file here to overwrite the stuff that comes from Bootstrap. So if I wanted to overwrite the paragraph element, this is, Bootstrap does this little dark gray here, but if I wanted to make that color red, okay, because my file loads after in glitch, it will overwrite the Bootstrap and make that paragraph text red. So that's what I just want to make you aware of is CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. You can, again, just change this P back to something like color inherit, and it should inherit the color from the body or from whatever style that was above it. And so I've just overwritten it twice, basically, and that's what happens with CSS. That's just that's a feature or a bug, some would say, but it's a part of the language. CSS is cascading, and so you want to make sure that you keep that in mind. You want to be overwriting the Bootstrap foundation.